Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we've got our week 2 of the EB02 weekly power rankings from TCG Matchmaking, and we do know like a couple decks are really good right now, but there's kind of like a shuffle for what are the other decks that are kind of getting into this top 10, I think for this meta right now. But generally speaking, I think this is a really diverse meta. There's a lot of different decks that are very viable right now, and it's been really cool to see kind of new decks kind of pop up, especially since this is a unique meta for us compared to Japan, where they had Gecko Moria, Ice Age, and the rest of those cards still legal for their meta for this one. So still unique for us. We're gonna get a unique meta next month too, and it's been a lot of fun kind of going over it as well. So we're gonna go over the power rankings, the kind of looking over the matchups, and then the 10 deck list for the best 10 decks for this week too. So if you guys are new to the channel though, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. We make a lot of content here for the One Piece card game, and also you can make sure to check out my website Eggman Events, where all of this data is linked and you guys can check it out on your own too. But jumping on into it for our this week, we do have Luffy as first, Vegapunk second, Bonnie third, Shanks fourth, Teach fifth, sixth is Rob Lucci, seventh is Anel, Star Deck 10 Luffy for 8, 9 is Lim, and 10 for Smoker. So some of these I think are a little bit understood, right? I think Green Purple Luffy is definitely the most popular leader right now since the newest one, and it's kind of perceived to be the strongest deck in this meta, but if I'm super honest, it's great, but not by like a super wide margin, right? I don't think it's something where it's like approaching tier 0 or anything. I do think like it has some like consistencies and some bad matchups, which you're going to look at in a little bit, but generally speaking, I think this deck is just really strong, and honestly, and maybe like a little bit overhyped, maybe. I don't want to be called out for it, but it's still really good. I'm not saying the deck is bad, but it's probably like a little bit less good than I was expecting going on into this one. So we are missing Doflamingo. I think that's like a standard deck, and also Purple Luffy for this week too. I mean, we have 2 other Purple Luffy leaders on this top 10, but the OPO5 one is missing this week. I do think that Purple Luffy is just like a little bit less good in the kind of this format. I do like if you're playing a deck, you're playing like Green Purple Luffy. I think that's kind of, most people are kind of leaning to that side, so it's a little bit less popular. The Red Purple Luffy leader is the deck list is a little interesting, so I'm looking forward to looking over that one too. But yeah, Doflamingo missing from this format does feel it's really interesting. I'm not going to say like I miss it because it's been so present so long, but without Jinbei, I do think it's like a little bit worse in this format in particular compared to OP10, where it was like missed, but it was still a functional deck. The fact that like this deck has like such a bad matchup into Green Purple Luffy does mean that's a little bit tough for it to be kind of around in a format like this one too. So other than that, I do think that there's more than 10 viable leaders in this format, and I've said this every week, but I'll say it again. Every kind of format kind of is different. There are some formats where it's like clearly these are 5 viable lists, and then like the 6th leader and below, you can tell they're kind of like a little bit less viable. But generally speaking, like there are 10 plus leaders that are viable this in this meta. I think right now there are others that you guys can play, and I do think they belong in this kind of power rankings kind of spot. So just because a leader is not on this ranked power rankings this week doesn't mean that it's not viable, and you can definitely still brew some other leaders as well. So going over quickly the win rates though for this week too, we do have like Green Purple Luffy does very well into a lot of the perceived best decks, right? Shanks and Teach, kind of 2 of the 3 best decks from kind of OP10, with the third one being Dofi in my mind. Having a good matchup into those 2 does feel really great, right? We do have a bad matchup in the Rob Lucci and Bonnie, so Bonnie kind of gets a little bit of a spot in this meta because of that, and then the rest are kind of a little bit evening as well, or evening. So we do see also like Red Green Smoker having a bit of an uphill matchup, or being a bit of an uphill matchup too, which again, like there's so many decks that are like mildly good, I think we're in OP10, that are now just like a little bit better just because they obtained a better matchup in a lot of ways. So Shanks in general is just going to continue to just be a medium deck, right? The fact that it's just really good into a lot of things, I do think is really strong. Teach is great into everything that's not Green Purple Luffy, where it has an abysmal win rate, so that's pretty tough for it. But I do think the deck is going to be probably a little bit more present than I was, most people were thinking for this format. That was really good. We have Rob Lucci, which we do have a good matchup into the Green Purple Luffy. Teach, conversely, is really bad for us because we really do depend on our on plays. And then also Anel's a bit of a rough matchup, which generally speaking and kind of historically speaking, Anel has been really, it's suffered against Rob Lucci. I think most of it's because Ice Age just means that anything you play can really get into range for removal. But without, Gecko Moria, Ice Age, remove your big body that you played last turn, I think Anel's actually, it's not too surprising that this deck has a bit of a good matchup, especially since, like, if you were able to stick your 10 cost Anel, the deck has a kind of tough time getting rid of it too. So generally speaking, I think this is a pretty good format for Anel because of that. So that helps. Though if we look at Anel's win rates, right, we do kind of lose out to 3 of the better decks in this format, right? The fact that green, purple, Luffy, Shanks, and Teach is tough for us is a bit uphill, right? We do have like the chance to beat green, purple, Luffy. The fact though that they can have a rush card that can attack twice in the turn that it's played does kind of invalidate a little bit of what this leader kind of wants to do. But there are a lot of aggressive decks that I think this deck does well against, and it does, I think, have a spot in this meta in general. Bonnie, again, seeing a positive win rate against green purple means that it's viable, right, in this format. Shanks and Teach and Rob Lucci are very tough for it, so you do have to be kind of aware of that, but I don't think they're completely unwinnable. Red Purple Luffy has a higher win rate average than I was expecting, right? A lot of even in the ish, right? We do kind of lose to Rob Lucci and Bonnie, but outside of that, everything else is pretty winnable, it seems, for most of this format too. So it is a bit of a weak deck in the fact that we only have 3 life, so it's a little bit fragile. Maybe weak's the wrong word, fragile to losing because of that. But if you're able to kind of set up your defense and you're able to get like a good amount of cards on board, you can really pressure a lot of decks and be in a good spot. So it's interesting to see there. Vegapunk is an immensely interesting deck, and we'll talk a little bit more of it when we look at the deck list for it. But the fact that it has like a lot of even matchups, right? Our only like abysmal matchup is Anel, and mostly because they can, heal a lot better than we can in a lot of ways. But the fact that this deck is really wonky on how it plays and the way that it can like make it very difficult to lose, even though it's on 2 life, does I think add a little bit of a boon for it. I'm actually really surprised that Rob Lucci is a bit of a uphill, like it's such a positive matchup, because from my experience, any kind of like additional removal you get on the Vegapunk is strong. But I will trust the numbers on this one. Shanks being a bit of a tough matchup is probably because they have a bit of removal and they have like some lasting power to make it difficult to lose. So I think that's great, especially against a leader that can't attack. So there it is. And then we've got Smoker, which again, it has a super positive win rate against green, purple, Luffy, and then just kind of a minus into everything else, right? Like red, purple, Luffy, sure, we're positive into, but the fact that like Shanks is like not in our favor, Teach is like 50-50, Lucci is abysmal, Bonnie's kind of 50-50, right? It's interesting to see what this deck kind of matchup wise looks like. I do think it still belongs to this meta in its own way, but it is going to be kind of tough for it to consistently, I think, establish itself against a lot of other decks. And then it's the opposite for this one, but for Lim, we do have like some, like for this column, right, the green is good for Lim, so, or the red's good for Lim. So we have a good matchup into green, purple, Luffy, right? Lucci, we still have a good matchup into, and Bonnie, we still have a good matchup into, but like Shanks is still very tough for us. Teach is still not in our favor, and then Anel and Vegapunk, both these decks that just continue to gain life and can kind of outgrind us from value, just makes it difficult for us to actually end the game sometimes. So anyways, here are the win rates for here in the matchup. You can check this out again on Eggman Events if you want to look at it in more detail. And let's go to the deck lists. Going into the deck list, we're going to look at the green and purple Luffy, and this deck's pretty known for what it wants to do for most of the part, right? We do have about 10 spots or so for tech choices or different ratios for a couple cards, right? One card I will say in particular, I've been seeing a little bit more of Luffy Taro. I do think this card is really good against decks that have a lot of removal, such as like Rob Lucci. This lets you kind of establish 2 bodies on board, and they kind of have a bit of a difficult time answering both of them, especially if you have the Merry-Go on the board. It just makes kind of one of these kind of difficult to remove. And then if Rob Lucci's, despite having the 4-drop right now, Rob Lucci generally only removes 1 body a turn, right? So being able to establish 2 bodies on 1 turn, make one of them pretty much difficult to remove, you can get a lot of advantage, I think, in those matchups. So I do like the one there. Electrical Luna's been really, really popular, I think, at 2 to 3 copies for most people. Not only is the Activate Maze ability great, but the trigger can also win you the game if you need to, so that's very great there. I've been seeing a lot of people play this Uso Hachi as well. just having another 2K that also you can play on 3 that also is, searchable off Zoro Juro is a kind of good compromise for a lot of things. I do like this 4-drop Zoro personally. I think this is kind of a 3 to 4 copies. We don't have a lot of ways to interact with cards in a lot of decks, so just being able to have a way to do so I think is important with the Zoro here. And then we do have just kind of the rest of the, I would say, standard package, right? There is like a little bit debate on like if you play either like the 3-drop Zoro Juro, the Frankie, or the Robin. I personally like the Robin just because this can get you some draw late game and just be kind of a difficult blocker to deal with. We're not playing any of the 2-drop Tony choppers in this build, but I do think that's viable too. You just have to be careful about any deck that can kind of answer it without removing it too. So I don't have much more to say about this deck. You guys know what it kind of looks like, and still going to be really, really viable in this format, I think, pretty handily. So there we go. Next up, you got Vegapunk, and this is just a weird deck, right? Everything about this is weird. Everything is about this is atypical for the One Piece card game, and just kind of works differently about how this game works in a lot of ways. So you guys probably know what he does, but just in case, can attack 2 life leader, which seems like abysmal stats, but the deck's really built around it. You do have this activate main for 1 to be able to put an egghead type with cost 5 or less to your life or to your field, which is really great. Our new copy of Vegapunk, I kind of looked at this card and I'm like, this card's fine, right? It's a good card, but it's not too crazy. And then I kind of forgot that you can play it off of the Irie Quasar help, right? So being able to say, I put this into my life using my leader effect, and then this says, play up to 1 of your egghead type characters with the cost of 5 or less from your trash, which means that you get to play out your Vegapunk, which means then that gets you play, something off the top of your deck occasionally, right? Like usually it does, right? We have so many scientists in this deck that generally it should do so, but being able to play 2 bodies off of a Rayquaza that we put into our life it's just very, very strong. I don't know what to say otherwise for it. So I do think that kind of helps the deck. We do have a couple like egghead cards, right? We are playing the Sanji blocker. Just being able to get a card draw advantage is great, especially in a deck that just generally needs that, since we usually have a low hand size. Eustace Kid is a great card for being able to just kind of get some burn damage in. We have some hard time kind of finishing games at some time, so this is really helpful. I do kind of like the Rush Ace in this deck, or any card with Rush, just because that does give you just a way to get another attack if your opponent's kind of blockered up and has a lot of removal. I do think like Rob Lucci's really popular in this format compared to where it was in OP10, and that has some ways to interact with this deck without giving you the life or the kind of counter advantage from it either. So this is definitely a deck that you kind of have to know how to play against. You kind of have to stall them at 2 life sometimes. You don't want to give them like kind of extra tempo to kind of go out for the game. And so because of that, it's something where I think that you as a player have to adjust to playing this deck, and your opponent has to adjust to playing this deck too. So I think that it could be a little bit less popular in the next couple weeks because of people adapting to how this deck works and where the actual advantage kind of lies. But I do think it's pretty viable right here, and it's really cool to see Vegapunk just honestly off of 1 card makes such a difference in a deck, and it's been really, really strong. So there we go. Next up, we've got Bonnie, and Bonnie's been, I think, pretty popular in this format too, especially more than it was in OP10. Just having a good matchup into Green Purple Luffy does have its benefits, and I think a lot of perks for you. We do have a new 7-cost Bonnie, which I think most people just don't play in this deck, which I think is understood, but also really interesting. It's something that's, a searchable 7-drop for this deck is not terrible. Having like a backup play when you don't want to play your Hody Jones, I feel like is a moderately good play too for the deck, but generally, like the fact that you only get the Dawn back the turn that it's played means it's a little bit limiting compared to something like Eau Rouge, which lets you get the Dawn back every turn, or Cavendish, or anything else. So this build's also not playing 5-cost Smoker, which I think is a very viable card if you want to play it at a couple copies. I also think that if we are interested in playing any of the new music cards, Bonnie is definitely a deck that can take advantage of it. Being able to look at all of our top end, I think is a real good boon, especially since we have 5 life. There's a good chance that we trigger it off of our life, which means that we do get that extra advantage as well. So we are kind of like difficult on finding Dawn at sometimes, right? The fact that we have to tap out at 10, or like Shanks. So the fact that we don't have like a lot of 8-drops that we play out means that the card could be a little bit difficult to find answers for later, but I do think it's still kind of worth testing if you guys haven't already. But anyways, Bonnie, pretty strong here. I think the top end works really well for what the meta is looking like, and here's the build there. Next up, we've got Shanks, and I would think most people would say Shanks was the best deck in our previous format, OP10. If not the best deck, it was the most popular deck people were playing, and just kind of the deck that you had to recognize and respect in a lot of ways. And I think this is still in the same way. There are some pretty big adjustments, I think, to Shanks for this current format. Specifically, we are playing a little bit more of like the control cards. What I find from there is we are playing like the Red Force, which I honestly really like this card. This being like an activate main to rest the stage to give something -1k just means that it gives your leader like a 6k sometimes, right, against the characters. It means that your Beckman is able to get rid of a 7k, which is really important when we're in the meta of 5-drop 7ks, so I think that helps as well. And then obviously our top end is like Newgate, Silvers, and our Shankses as well. But I'd say this is probably like the most control build that I've seen from this deck, right? We don't have really any rush outside of the 10 cost Shanks, which is pretty tough to deal with. I do think like Dragon is still like a card that's worth investing time into. I think that card is very, very strong. But being able to say, you know what, Red Force being able to get the removal, Divine Departure is really good. There's just like a lot of great cards for this deck that being able to answer like your opponent's 5/7s is just really difficult for them to really do anything with as well. So I like this deck a lot. I think that Shanks is really viable in this format still. I don't think it's really dropped off this much. This list is in particular a lot of interesting one-ofs too, right? And we're definitely more of like the Red Hair Pirates package, seeing the copies of Building Snake as well just helps us like identify that. But I think this deck is strong, and I really like seeing what it's been doing in the last little bit. So you'll see, I think you're going to see a lot of people kind of rotate with how this deck works and kind of take away some staples. Like we don't see any 3-cost copies of Sanji, which I think most people are playing at a couple copies of in most builds, right? We're not seeing any copies of the 5-drop Rush Luffy, but we still can, right? This is just like Shanks is very, very open for your deck building and your choices, and I think it's going to continue to be like that for the next little bit too. So not much more to say, but here's the build here for Shanks. And then next up you've got Marshall D. Teach, and this deck did get like a little bit of, or I think it's actually OP11 actually gets a little bit, right? This is from OP5, right? But we do have some like new blockers that we can maybe use and get advantage for. But this build's really interesting. We're just super duper blocker heavy, right? We do have 3 copies of the Vasco shot as well as 4 copies of the Vivi, which is great. We don't see like as much removal, right? We don't see any copies of the cost reduction from the Von Augur, and we don't see the Laboon, right? We don't even see Doc Q, right? So this deck is really more about blocking, being able to likely just get battle damage in. We are playing also 4 copies of Liberation. So since the fact that this looks for cards with base cost of 6, so it doesn't matter that you use like Marigo to increase the cost of your Luffy to a 5/7, or sorry, your Sanji putting from a 5/7 to a 7/7. This only cares about the original cost of the card, so that can actually be really impactful for being able to remove that, even if they do have the cost increase. So seeing that go from 1 to 2 to 0 copies usually to 4 in this deck is really interesting. So this is definitely a different build. I haven't really seen this build of it either, but it's doing very, very well on the rank ladder right now. And I do think it's really worth mentioning. There are ways to adjust to a format where there's one deck that's clearly the best, and a lot of people want to kind of adjust to it. So here's a build here for Teach. And the next up, we've got Rob Lucci, which again, this deck has gone, I think, a little bit more popular now that we do have like some decks. Like again, this has like such a good potential for a green purple Luffy matchup, right? Especially since that deck doesn't have like a lot of removal. We can do something where on like 4 we play either Laboon or our Kuzan. That just lets us get things into range for removal, and then we can do something like play a Hina, right, or something like that to get like some additional removal if we need to, a reduction. So I think that's very, very strong, right? Giving -4 then -1 from Lucci, you still get the 4-drop removal from Rob Lucci on a 7 cost, which is absurd, and that helps you just kind of get the pace of the game a lot of the ways. So I think Lucci is really great. I know a lot of different, I've been testing out a lot of different black decks myself, including like Star Deck 14, and the removal for those cards, you feel very good about it. It helps you a lot in these matchups, and it can be very, very strong. So I do still like the top end, right? We do have the Shishigi, the Kaido. Both these cards are just fantastic for helping against specifically the Teach matchup too, so we're not as like rough about that either. But I do think this deck is in a really, really good spot. So not much more to say, but here's the build here for Rob Lucci. And then next up, we've got Anel. So this is a pretty obnoxious deck, I'll be honest. I know a lot of people are probably kind of figuring out if they, like Anel, if they've played against it Anel, if they've missed Anel being in the OP10 format, right? That's kind of one of the bigger difference. I think Anel was still probably pretty viable in OP10 in Japan, but it really didn't do anything for us, right? The fact that Kingdom Come left the format meant a lot of people just weren't on the deck anymore. But now that we have our new 10-drop Anel, this card just kind of changes the pace of how this deck works and really gives us like an actual in-arc type boss monster, which we never really had with this deck either. So I do like a lot of the tech choices here. Brûlé is a obnoxious blocker right now. It just kind of makes your opponent have to respect the fact that you can have Brûlé, you can have Beige, you can have zero cost. Like 10% of your deck, 20% of your deck is just like obnoxious triggers that just will negate an attack essentially, which is really strong. So other than that, we do have some adjustments. We do have like the new X Drake, which is really strong. We have Braum as well, which lets you get rid of a 1-cost stage, so specifically good against Teach as well as Purple Luffy to be able to get rid of their 1-drop stages. I do think that this deck also, if you want to play some of the music cards, you can definitely play it because, you have so many chances for your life to trigger. It means you get to get that search, which is really great. So, which all of our top end is just absurdly good, right? We have just so many good top end cards that I think that's worth being able to have like a searchable way to get them. We've got our 8-drop Katakuri, we've got Eustace Kid, we've got Yamato, we've got Ace, and we've got the new Anel. So being able to find a way to search them, especially since like if we're at 10 Dawn, we can use the song, we can search for Katakuri and play it on the same turn. That is maybe enough to be able to help you to like survive one more turn that maybe you weren't expecting to do. So I think it's worth testing. You guys could disagree with me, but I think this is still a really obnoxious deck. A lot of people are probably choosing their ratios for it, but man, the late game pressure from this deck is really obnoxious. So here's the build there. Next up, we got Red and Purple Luffy. And honestly, I didn't expect this deck to be very popular in this format, right? The fact that, the deck of the format is about establishing a lot of 7K bodies that attack really nicely into a 6K leader. It just makes it really difficult for Red Purple Luffy to kind of get there and be kind of healthy into the late game. But I really like this build. If you look at it, there's a lot of interesting choices. This is probably a more unique build of this deck than I've really seen before, and it really wants to make me like test it a little bit. So we are playing like the red and purple like straw hat package, mostly just the purple. The only red stuff is Nami and the Sanji. We don't have as much of a top end, right? We only have the Sanji as well as the 9-drop Luffy, but we do have 4 whole copies of the Mole pistol. So being able to use that is great in this deck, right? We can play like Zoro for 4, and then we can use the Mole gun to get rid of a Sanji Pudding or something of the like. Getting rid of a 7-cost for 4 Dawn is just really helpful, I think, in this deck in particular. So that does help you a lot. It does help you get some great advantage, right? We do have a lot of defensive tools in the Rad Beam Gum Gum Giant as well. And it's just a really interesting build that I haven't really tried before. So I think this is unique. I definitely have to do some testing for myself to see what it's viable with and how it does. But we also can take advantage of the 6-drop Secret Rare since we are a multicolor leader. Just the fact that we have this thing that we can play with Rush. And then if we need to go for game with it, we can, right? The fact that we can play this for 6, we can use the when attacking to return a Dawn. But then we can use like our 10-cost, our Luffy leader effect to get 1 back if we're at 10 when we played it. So we get to do a 9K attack and a 10K attack if we try to go for game off of 1 card, which is generally not too bad for a lot of situations, on top of having our leader attack too. So not much more to say. We also can do like 2 9s and a 7 with leader attack, and that's also pretty good too. So otherwise, I think this deck is really interesting to see. Like red, purple, Straw Hats just have like a lot of good synergy. Navi being able to search literally every card in our deck, like every card outside of Law is searchable, which is absurd, and that does get us a lot of value from there as well. So here's the build there for red, purple, Luffy, and then we've also got Lim. Lim here is in an interesting spot. I do think that it's probably a little bit worse in this format compared to OP10. It is the second best green purple Luffy or green purple deck I think in this format, which is still pretty good. That's saying a lot, but The fact that we still are like a really good tempo deck is really great. Sakazuki being able to remove a 5-drop Sanji Pudding without them, if they don't have Mary Go, I think is worth it too. But it also just gets a lot of great removal. We also can use Electrical Luna to our benefit, which is really nice. And it really just kind of depends. Like, this deck is still like a lot of a dice roll format, where if we go first, we're in a really good spot. And if we go second, we are kind of considering what we do with the rest of this deck. So I still think we're in a good spot. I like this deck a lot, and here's the build here from Lim. And then to wrap it up, we've got Smoker, and kind of like the inverse of Lim. I do think Smoker got a little bit better in this format, even though we're not running any new cards specifically, but being able to use this deck to just be very, very aggressive against some decks is great. The fact that we have so much ways to get our additional Dawn is great. I honestly like, this deck can be like really aggressive, or it can be really defensive. You really get to kind of choose your pace of play. I feel like a lot of the time it's really interesting kind of way that this deck works. So some key cards though. Obviously, 5-drop Smoker is amazing. We want to play this as soon as possible. Just gets us a lot of value throughout it. Ben Beckman being able to get removal is fantastic. Hody Jones as well as Eustace Kid. I'm still a real big fan of 2-drop Monet. I think this card is really, really, really good and helps us, especially like in a leader that like you get like the 2 on back anyways for free is really great. I would like almost think about playing a song in one of these decks, just because you are able to, like, your top end is really great to fight. And the fact that Smoker gets 2 Dawn back for free every turn means with the songs you get like a free search every turn if you need to, if you compare it to other decks. So and I do think this deck is so reliable on finding Smoker on the turn that you need to play it on 5, that you need to kind of find it as soon as possible. So I do also think that this deck is like a little bit susceptible to the fact that everyone's trying to get rid of 5-drops. Tashigi still helps you get there too, but it is a little bit rough when most decks have kind of answers to these cards too. So I don't really have much more to say about this. I think that Smoker's in a good spot. I do expect it to do pretty well in this format too. And here is the build here. So that's going to be it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you want to check out any of the deck lists from the previous weeks or anything else, you can find them on my website, Eggman Events. And I'll see you the next week. Bye-bye.